Hello, I'm Joan Manson of Manson Fine Art. Thank you for joining me today as I share this picture of pansies created with Jane Davenport Pastels. If you enjoy my videos, please click on subscribe and the bell. And if you enjoy this video, I thank you for giving me a thumbs up. I downloaded the image from Pixabay some time ago and used a portion of the image to create this slightly oversized picture of pansies. I used Jane Davenport Pastel palettes and the color palette Chilled and Birthday Suit. I also used some baton blenders and sponge applicator. To begin with, rather than tracing, I just drew freehand using a charcoal pencil because it's freehand and because I'm happy to take liberties at every time the image isn't exactly the same. The petals aren't exactly the same in size or shape, and I've moved some things closer and some things further apart. And that's the joy of drawing freehand. You can also copy this image on, if you prefer, using tracing paper or just putting color on the back of your printout and copying it on as you would with tracing paper ordinarily. I have put this on double time so it is in time lapse so that it doesn't move too slowly for you. I did a previous video on tulips using the same materials. This time the difference is that I am doing this on a Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, which is a sanded paper and has greater tooth than the Canson paper that I used when I did the tulips. I was a little concerned that it took so much to build up the colors on the previous piece that I thought that I should change over to something that had greater tooth. I'd found on the other piece that the Davenport Pastels didn't apply as much color as the Pan Pastels did. So I wanted to see what the difference was using greater tooth. Okay, so I pretty much decided that my drawing is complete. I've blocked out by folding the parts of the image that I'm going to be coloring it and set that aside so I can look at it as I move along. And here are the pastels. On the left is the Birthday Suit and on the right is Chilled. I'm using what is comparatively close to a burnt umber on top of that wine background. If I miss anything, it really won't matter. It's a wine that blends well with this brown, and a mottled feeling in the background of a painting of flowers is really something to be very happy for. I'm applying this with a sponge applicator. It's a cosmetic sponge applicator that I picked up online at just a bag full. I think I've got 40 sponges for $10 or much less. And now I'm adding tinted turquoise. I'm hoping in doing this that I will pick up the color underneath it. It's my preference when I work to blend on the paper. You can blend, and also to blend in the pans themselves. You can move the color to a piece of copy paper, blend on the copy paper, and then pick it up from there. But that's just a system I've never felt comfortable with. Somehow it's just an extra step I don't want to deal with, but it does work. And I am pushing a little harder, trying to get that color to to hold up pretty well. And as with the video that I did with the tulips, I'm using only the 2 tools. And now I'm just using the baton to add a little lighter green. I do want the background to be modeled out of focus. And I'm doing that by adding different shades of green and brown to the background, letting them blend in to add the out of focus image of the background. And again, this section, actually all of the video, is in double time. So it's time lapse and you won't be watching every single stroke. The color is applying more thickly on the sanded paper than it did on the Canson paper, and I'm very pleased about that. It takes a little bit more to fill an area than it does the pen pastel. And this is a very light green, a yellow green. But already the color is much stronger here much more quickly than it was when I was working on the pastel paper, the Canson pastel paper. So, point 1, much better to use a sanded paper when dealing with pen pastels or with Davenport's pastel palettes. I'm just using the edge of my baton to draw in color. I can't do truly fine detail with it, but I can come pretty close. I'm working on the back of a bud with, of course, leaves, but I need to have some differentiation between those little leaves around the bud of the pansy. So I'm adding a little bit more contrast on that stem and on the base of the bud. As I mentioned in my previous video, and I'll say it again, um, the the Jane Davenport pastels are made in cosmetic colors. They are not intended for use on the human face, but they are intended to replicate them in the various charts and images that she has that you can use to design makeup and other craft projects. I'm adding a little of the light magenta, a little of the brown. It's sort of a burnt sienna tint. And that's the white. Is one of the drawbacks, since white is one of the colors I use the most of, is that if I run out of white or any of the colors in this set, I can't replace it with another little box. I have to buy the entire set. The sets run $20 retail, but they can be gotten for as little as $17, depending upon where you shop. And there are 18 colors in each set. There's a third set that's here I didn't use because I hadn't received it by the time I wanted to do this piece. But I thought I had enough colors. One issue that I did have with this, and you'll see as it goes along, is that I was never able to make that violet white enough. The white's pretty strong, but not as strong as the Pan Pastel. And in fact, all the Pan Pastels, as far as I could see, are stronger, more vibrant, and lay down better. So I was never able to get that level of pale violet, almost white that was on the actual plant in the actual photo. And I really liked it, would have wanted it, but couldn't get there. But this is all part of experimenting with other media, learning how they work and what you can and cannot do. And it doesn't mean I'm going to cast these aside or give them away. I'll use some of the colors from time to time with other projects if I see something where I need a different kind of a tone or color. They apply very nicely with the batons, and you can use any sort of cosmetic baton that you want. This is a box of 20, well, comes from a box of 20, a container of 20 baton blenders, and I paid less than $10 for them. It really is a good price, and you can pick them up at the cosmetics counter of your drugstore. Or you can get them online as well. And the same is true with the sponges or any other applicators. And you can try using brush applicators as well. I do sometimes use brushes with the Pan Pastels, and they work very nicely. And the cosmetic brushes, while some can be extremely expensive, many can be very inexpensive. And the difference between the sponge applicators and the brushes is that it's easier to clean the brushes, and the brushes ultimately last longer. Although I've had sponge applicators die on me and I have to replace the sponges, but that's not true with brushes. It's not like working with oils or acrylics on your brush. These aren't going to harden them. You just brush them on paper towels, and at some point, if you wish to, you can rinse them out with some soap and water and let them dry, and they're perfect. That's the darker violet that I'm adding in on top of the wine. I thought the wine would be a good choice because of the purple and the pansies, that it would help me in setting up shadow. The differences between the shades and these pastels is very subtle, and it's created to be that way because they're created in the style of eyeshadows and rouges and um, and will blend nicely together, but not for the kind of contrast that I really would have preferred. My end product was lovely. It just wasn't what I had wanted. And I suppose when I was done, I could have gone back over it with the white from the Pastel set and the magenta tint, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to create this for the most part with just the Jane Davenport palette pastels. What also is nice about this set or these sets is that you can open them up and they don't take up a lot of space on your table. You can lay them out side by side and let them sink into the cover of the one before it, or you can lay them out as I have. I'm trying to make shades here, so I'm mixing the turquoise with the sienna and the umber and the magenta tint, or trying to make brownish colors, brownish shades of that. Can't really get quite the dark that I'd like. And I actually can't get quite the light that I want either, but I'm working toward bringing up as great a contrast as I can. I have applied fixative to the previous piece that I did, and then of course to this one after I finished it. And I found that the fixative works just as well. I use a Sennelier pastel fixative, and I don't have very much in terms of darker areas and no splatter, and it holds very, very nicely. So I'm very pleased with that. And she does, from what I understand, having read from the website, the pastels are light fast. That's the implication I got. I couldn't get ratings or anything, but she does recognize the importance of light fastness. Now we're adding yellow to the center. The yellow is very nice. And I said before, the red based and the yellow bases are very much brighter, and they much stronger, and they show up much more clearly. And I'm using a blending stump to make fine lines that come from the center, the stamen of the pansy. And I'm going to use a charcoal pencil because that combination of colors just didn't make anything dark enough for me. A little bit of white. And I do like working with the pastels, pan pastels, or the pastel palette, um, and not using pencils. I enjoy both processes. It depends on what I want the end result to be. But I do like the lovely, soft, impressionistic result that comes from not using pencils or not using very many pencils. Now, there are fine details that just can't be gotten with the brush or the applicator, which is why I needed the charcoal pencil. And I'm just creating and adding more shadow. And I'm trying very hard to keep using just the colors in the palettes, mixing brown and turquoise and magenta to try to make browns. And because of the wine color background, it does help. It is helping me. And please remember, if you do buy the Davenport pastels, they are not intended for use on your face, and particularly not on your eyes. These are for artists' purposes only. I definitely think, depending upon what your needs are, I definitely think that if you want to try working with pan pastels on some level, that you could pick up these palette boxes and work with them and see how you enjoy the process at the very least. And then when you feel you can, if you wish to, you can invest in the pan pastels. And you may never wish to. You may just want to stick with these and regular pastels, or just regular pastels. And pastel pencils are wonderful. I use pastel pencils as well, and I use those with my pan pastels. And now I'm signing off. And just going around the edges with my white Derwent pastel pencil, trying to add in those little highlights on the edge of the pansy petals. You're not always necessarily finished when you sign your piece. Sometimes you take a look and you say, oh, no, I can do that. A little highlight here, a little shadow there. I was hoping to be able to bring up more light violet, make those a little bit whiter, but I never quite made it. But as I said, they're a lovely and impressionistic painting of pansies using these pastels. And if you do have them or you decide to purchase them, experiment using them with regular pastels. You might find the two may supplement each other very nicely for whatever your style of work is. And we have finished. I'm comparing the photograph with my picture. You can see there's a great deal more contrast, difference in light and dark in the original. But if you enjoyed this and you want to see more, please click on subscribe and the bell. And if you've liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. Thank you once again. I look forward to sharing my next project with you.